Back in ancient times, when judges ruled Israel and the people were still lost amid the ups and downs of faith, an ordinary man named Ehud was born. No one knows for sure the date of his birth, nor the house where he was first cradled, but it is known that he came from the tribe of Benjamin, the smallest of all. Right away, that said a lot. It was as if destiny whispered, "Pay attention to this one, okay?" Ehud grew up at a time when Israel lived under the heavy yoke of the Moabites. Life was hard. The people harvested what they planted, but much of it went straight into the hands of the enemy. There was oppression, humiliation, and a constant feeling of helplessness. Prayers went up, but answers seemed slow in coming. Ehud, even as a young man, saw everything with attentive eyes. He was not a man to make noise. He observed in silence, and in that silence, something grew inside him. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting Bible stories and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. If you like the content, feel free to support our work with a financial donation by clicking on the Thanks a Lot button. You can also become a member of the channel and enjoy exclusive benefits. Now, here's a detail that no one forgets. He was left-handed. Yes, he used his left hand. For many people at the time, this was strange, even suspicious. The right hand was a sign of strength, honor, and blessing. The left, oh, that was outside the norm. But maybe that's exactly what made him so special. He was different, and it was precisely that difference that God decided to use. While others looked at Ehud with suspicion, heaven looked at him with purpose. There was a hidden fire in him, a courage that had not yet had a chance to show itself, but that chance was coming. The oppression of the Moabites did not diminish, and the people could no longer bear it. It was as if the ground was being prepared, stone by stone, for a turnaround that no one expected, but that someone was already ready to face. The years passed, and the situation only got worse. The Moabites, led by a king named Eglon, had become the masters of the land. Just imagine, foreigners ruling and misruling within the promised land. It was not only unjust, it was outrageous. The people of Israel were suffocating. Everything they harvested, everything they planted, ended up in the hands of the enemy. It was like working with both hands and still going to bed hungry. Eglon was an arrogant man, the kind who thought he was invincible. Fat, vain, and cruel, he feasted on the fruits of others' labor, and to ensure that no one rebelled, he surrounded himself with guards, spies, and heavy taxes. Every year, Israel was forced to bring him gifts. But these gifts were more like humiliations in the form of sacks of wheat, olive oil, and forced labor. It was as if, with each new delivery, the dignity of the people slipped a little more through their fingers. Worse still, it seemed that God had fallen silent. The elders murmured, the young people rebelled, the mothers wept. Some even got used to the yoke, like those who settle for uncomfortable shoes because they have no other choice. But deep down, there was still a cry. The soul of the people groaned, and this groan, though muffled, rose to the heavens. It was under this pressure that Ehud began to be noticed, not as a hero, not yet, but as someone different. He didn't shout or protest, but his eyes spoke volumes. When everyone bowed down, he remained steadfast. When many accepted their fate, he seemed to carry something hidden, a plan perhaps, a purpose that did not yet have a name. Each year, a group of Israelites was chosen to take tribute to Eglon's palace. It was a bitter march, and it was in one of those years, amid discouragement and downcast eyes, that Ehud received the order to go along. Only no one suspected what was going on in his mind. He wasn't just going to deliver gifts. He was carrying something else, something hidden. And it wasn't just anger or indignation. Ehud had forged a small sword, sharp on both sides, with a handle fitted to fit under his clothes, attached to the right side of his thigh. An unusual choice, because most warriors were right-handed, but Ehud was left-handed. And that changed everything. He went unnoticed. The guards didn't look in the wrong direction. One detail, one simple detail, and there was the difference between dying like everyone else or changing history. During the walk to Moab, he kept his face serene, calm even. He didn't even look like he was carrying a secret under his tunic. The others didn't know, they didn't ask. Each dealt with their burden as best they could, but Ehud, he just looked ahead, as if something inside him had awakened, as if each step was a step towards something much greater. When they arrived at the palace, everything went according to protocol. Gifts were delivered, bows were made. Eglon smiled, satisfied, like a fat pig in front of his favorite dish. Ehud watched him. The moment was not yet right. He had to wait. Time was of the essence, because it wasn't just about sticking a sword in someone. It was about ending years of shame. It was about restoring dignity. And it was just after the delivery, when everyone was getting ready to leave, that Ehud announced that he had a secret message for the king. Ehud's request sounded strange, but too curious for the king to ignore. "I have a secret message for you, O king," he said in a tone that mixed respect and mystery. Eglon, full of himself, puffed up with pride as always, ordered everyone to leave the room. The guards left without arguing. Who would doubt a thin, silent Israelite with no visible sword? The room fell silent, just the two of them. A heavy throne in the center, the king slumped in it like a sack of flour. The door closed behind them. Ehud took a step forward, his eyes fixed on the king. He said again, "I have a message from God for you." That was it. This was it. Every muscle in his body knew what to do. With a movement as quick as the snap of a dry branch, Ehud drew his sword with his left hand, from the side no one expected. And before Eglon could react, the blade had already pierced his belly. It went deep, so deep that the fat swallowed the hilt. There was no time even to scream. The king's eyes widened, as if trying to understand what had just happened, but it was too late. The body fell, heavy, slow, muffling its last breath on the carpet. Judas wasted no time. He blocked the door, locked it with his own hands, and left through the servants' passageway, his steps light and his heart beating like a drum at a war festival. No one saw him. Meanwhile, the king's servants waited outside. They thought he was busy, and for a while, no one dared to interrupt. The silence inside the room grew strange, but no one had the courage to open it. Outside, Ehud was already gaining distance. He descended the stone steps, crossed the fields with his tunic flapping in the wind, as if carrying more than freedom, carrying an even greater mission ahead of him. The sun was already beginning to set when Ehud reached the mountainous region of Seirah. His feet were covered in dust, his face sweaty, but his eyes shone with the determination of one who had overcome fear. He did not look back. He knew that time was short and that the Moabites would soon notice the king's absence, but for now, silence still worked in his favor. Meanwhile, in the palace, the servants remained outside the room, waiting. They exchanged glances and whispered among themselves. They began to think that the king was resting, or even, relieving himself. No one wanted to be the first to knock on the door. Minutes turned into hours. The smell gradually revealed what words dared not say. When they finally plucked up the courage and broke down the door, they found Eglon lying on the floor, already dead. The sword was still stuck in him. Panic, running, screams. But Ehud was already far away. When he arrived in Ephraim, he wasted no time. He climbed a high rock and blew the trumpet loudly. A sharp sound cut through the air, like an arrow calling to war. And it was as if that sound awakened something dormant in the hearts of the people. Men and women came out of their tents, their eyes wide, their ears alert. Ehud raised his voice and said, "Follow me! The Lord has delivered the Moabites into our hands." It was the first time in a long time that someone had spoken with such certainty. No beating around the bush, no doubt. A simple command from a man who had just challenged a king. And the Israelites obeyed. They grabbed spears, sticks, whatever they had in their hands. One by one they joined Ehud. It was as if his courage was contagious. And then, with the people behind him, he marched straight to the Jordan Valley, where the Moabites had no idea what awaited them. The sound of sandals hitting the dry ground echoed through the narrow trails. Ehud led the way, steady as an ancient tree trunk, and the people followed, their hearts beating with hope. It was night, but no one stopped. They descended to the fords of the Jordan, where the Moabites were passing back and forth with their soldiers and supplies. That was where reinforcements, food, and military support were coming from. And now, that was where everything would change. Without making a sound, Ehud divided the men. His eyes saw what others did not: the terrain, the numbers, the timing. It wasn't just courage, it was strategy. He ordered them to cut off the Moabites' route and block the river crossing. It was like a trap being set in the dark. When the first group of Moabites approached, thinking everything was normal, they were taken by surprise. The Israelites attacked with force, with anger contained for years. There was no warning, no mercy. Screams, swords, dust. The ground was stained, and the sky heard each blow like a drum of liberation. The Moabites had no time to react. They were used to seeing Israel on its knees, submissive. They never imagined that now they would face a people standing tall, thirsty for justice. Ehud was in the midst of the battle, without hiding, fighting as if each blow were a settling of accounts. And the Israelites, inspired, followed their leader with fury and faith. More than 10,000 Moabite men fell that day. None escaped. It was as if the earth had decided to close the door on oppression. Israel, for the first time in years, was winning. And in the midst of that scene, among broken swords and fallen bodies, Ehud stood firm, already thinking about what would come next, because even with victory in his hands, he knew that the work was not yet done. When the sun finally rose the next day, the landscape of the valley was different. Where Moabite soldiers with shining shields had once marched, now lay the silence of defeat. Birds circled in the sky like sentinels, and the smell of the field was mixed with dust, sweat, and the end of a rain that had lasted too long. Ehud walked among his people, his face dirty from battle, but his eyes, those eyes carried something new. The news of the victory spread faster than the wind among the tribes. From mouth to mouth, from village to village, the people of Israel began to lift their heads. It was as if a fog had lifted. Ehud has defeated the Moabites, they said. God has delivered us. The men beat their chests. The women wept with relief. For the first time in a long time, fear lost its hold on the homes. Ehud, however, did not let himself be carried away by the euphoria. He knew that war is not just about swords, it is also about building, and that freedom without direction turns into chaos. While the people celebrated, he moved. He visited the tribes, listened to the elders, gathered the leaders. Not with the pomp of a king, nor with an air of ownership. He walked among the people as one who carries responsibility in his blood, and with every step, a decision. At every meeting, a seed of something new was planted. He didn't just want to win a battle. He wanted to see Israel back on the right path. And the people followed him. Not out of fear, not out of force, but because they felt that there was truth there. Meanwhile, on the borders, the neighbors watched. Some were frightened, others suspicious. Ehud's name began to circulate beyond the Jordan. Who was this left-handed man who had overthrown a king and changed the destiny of an entire people? It wasn't long before Ehud's name became a whisper in conversations, a song at parties, even a warning among neighboring kings. The left-handed man of Benjamin, they said, some with respect, others with fear. But for Israel, he was more than a warrior. He was a sign that God still remembered his people. He was not crowned. He did not wear a robe, but everyone knew who would guide their decisions from then on. The cities began to breathe again. The fields that had been plundered began to produce freely again. The people no longer had to look over their shoulders every time they heard footsteps. Children played in the streets, and the elderly returned to sit at their doorsteps. There was a sense of peace that many had never experienced before. But this peace did not fall from the sky like magic. It was built day after day with work, justice, and vigilance. Ehud was not one for long speeches. He did not like applause. He preferred to listen more than talk. He visited every corner, talked to ordinary people, looked them in the eye. When conflicts arose between the tribes, and they always did, he arrived before the problem turned into a fight. It was as if he carried a clock in his chest, marking the right time to act. At times, rumors arose that the Moabites might try to return. The memory of oppression still lived in the hearts of many, but all it took was for someone to remember what Ehud had done, and the fear lost its power. Trust was like a fire that had to be kept burning. It needed to be fed and watched over. And amid this hard-won routine of peace, Israel stood firm. But time, as always, does not stand still. The years passed, generations changed, and structures shifted. The people began to settle down. The stories about Ehud became memories told around the campfire. The years of peace stretched out like a warm blanket over the people of Israel. Time passed slowly, almost lazily. The harvests were plentiful, the festivals became more frequent, and the dangers, well, they seemed like something from a distant past. Ehud's name was still respected, of course, but now it sounded more like a legend than a leader. The new generations grew up hearing stories of the hidden sword, the fat king, and the daring escape, but they listened as if hearing an old tale before bedtime. Ehud, meanwhile, no longer marched through the fields or wielded weapons. He had aged with dignity, without luxury or a throne. He remained simple, observant, but increasingly silent. He carried in his eyes the memory of difficult days, and on his shoulders the weight of keeping the people on the path. But he knew, as only wise old men know, that the human heart is like fire. If you neglect it, it goes out, or worse, it spreads uncontrollably. Over time, obedience became a habit, and habit became laxity. Faith became automatic, mechanical, soulless. Some began to flirt with the customs of other peoples, strange rituals, beautiful but empty ideas, all little by little, without scandal, like a thin crack in a solid wall. Ehud saw all this, and although he did not speak much, he carried that old feeling in his heart, the same one he had years ago when Moab still reigned. It was as if silence once again was trying to warn him that something was coming, that all that tranquility hid a new threat, still unnamed, but growing closer. Ehud's last days were peaceful, almost silent, as if he knew that his mission had already been accomplished. He did not seek glory or applause. He never wanted that. His legacy was written in his actions, in the choices he made at the right time, and in his courage to be different. Ehud was not a king. He did not build a palace. He did not want to be worshipped. He was the man who accepted the call and faced the impossible with a hand that few trusted. His name became a symbol, a living metaphor that God chooses whom he wants, and often it is the one no one expects. The left-handed man who brought down the giant, the simple man who became a leader, the silent man who made noise at the right moment. Ehud showed that true strength is not found in what the world values, size, power, or appearance, but in the courage to act, even when no one believes. When he left behind a renewed people, but also a warning hidden between words and sighs. Freedom must be cherished, faith must be alive, and courage must never be forgotten. Because danger never truly disappears. It just changes form. Ehud's name echoes to this day, reminding us that the unlikely can win, that the hand that seems weak can be the most powerful, and that each of us carries within us something capable of changing history. The call is not always easy, the fight is not always fair, but the decision to raise the sword, literal or figurative, is what defines the path. When we look at Ehud's life, we realize that his story is not just about swords or battles, but about something much greater, the courage to be different, and the strength of a calling that cannot be ignored. He was not the strongest, nor the most popular, nor the crowd's favorite. He was an ordinary man with a peculiarity that many saw as a weakness, his left hand. But it was precisely this difference that became his greatest weapon. His life teaches us that sometimes what seems like a flaw or a limitation can be what God uses to bring about the greatest revolution. Ehud reminds us that we don't have to follow the rules or wait for others' approval to act. True power lies in accepting who we are and using that to fulfill what we have been given to do, even if it seems difficult or impossible. Furthermore, his story shows that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. EÚDE faced a powerful king in enemy territory with only a small sword and a lot of faith. This inspires us to believe that with determination and wisdom, we can overcome life's greatest obstacles. And there is also the lesson that freedom and peace do not come for free. They require struggle, vigilance, and above all, responsible leadership. Ehud not only defeated his enemies, but also made sure that the people did not lose their way after victory, showing that true transformation begins from within. Ultimately, the story of Ehud remains alive because it speaks directly to our hearts, inviting us to look at our own left hands, recognize our hidden strength, and take action. Because we all have a calling, a mission, and only those who have the courage to answer it can change the world around them. So are you ready to discover your sword? If you like the story of Ehud and want to continue following other stories of faith and overcoming adversity, be sure to like this video and share it with your loved ones. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together, we will explore more powerful lessons from the Bible.